A seismic shift that is in fact underway in Bangladesh, where a bold and controversial movement is challenging the very foundation of the nation's identity. The Anti-Discrimination Students Movement, it had earlier announced a historic declaration aimed at overhauling Bangladesh's 1972 constitution, a document that symbolizes the country's hard-won independence. Today, at the Central Shahid Minar, we've seen thousands rally under the banner of the March for Unity, with fiery slogans calling for an end to Indian influence and even demanding the death sentence for Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. These unprecedented scenes and this unprecedented call by the protesters for change has sparked outrage, with critics labeling it as an insult to the legacy of the liberation war altogether. But as the manifesto's unveiling looms, the tension deepens. The interim government distances itself. That's right, Mohammad Yunus's interim government has distanced itself. Opposition parties, including Khaleda Zia's BNP, decry the movement as fascist, and fears of a polarized Bangladesh intensify. Is this the birth of a new Bangladesh or the unraveling of its democratic fabric? Is Dhaka turning into a mirror image of Pakistan, with political divides, rising religious intolerance, and external players, China and Pakistan, tightening their grip? What does this mean for India's security and the regional influence? Have the sacrifices of 1971 been forgotten in the pursuit of this new vision? That's why tonight, with an esteemed set of panelists, we ask this big question: is Bangladesh rewriting its destiny or repeating history? Let's dive in. Joining me here on the broadcast, Ambassador Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, and Suhas Chakma, Director, Rights and Risks Analysis Group. Always a pleasure to have both of you on the show here on News 9. Of course, before I extend the greetings for a Happy New Year, Ambassador, take a look at what's happened in Dhaka at the Minar Chowk. I mean, you've got thousands that rallied. I was listening to rock music that was played over there, which then again will encapsulate the imagination of the youth over there in Bangladesh. Really heavy on rock music and metal music, of course, in Urdu and all those languages. But what does these pictures signify now? This overhauling of the constitution, anti-India rhetoric, chants for death of Sheikh Hasina. What are you picking up, ma'am? How can you help the viewers here back at home understand what's at play?
Well, certainly, Happy New Year to you and to all your viewers. That's a great moment we are facing. On what's happening in Bangladesh, I think of course, we are watching it very carefully and we have to continue to watch it. But I think this is really a jostling for power that is going on in Bangladesh. And let me say that this Students Against Discrimination, this movement is now trying to reinvent itself as a political party. And they're, Jatiyo, Okyo Jotham name they've given now, Greek Okyo Jyoti something, name they've given to themselves, because the entire so-called students' uprising that they were touting since 5th of August and before and after, saying it's the students who've done it, it's the students' revolution, this narrative has fallen very thin. And the original groups that were there with the students before the 5th of August, they have all fallen away. And even when the students' groups tried to, surround the president's office and get him to resign, there was not much support for them. And now that Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus has announced elections, although in a year's time, everybody is jostling for power. And I would say that even a difference is building up between the interim regime with Chief Advisor Mohammad Yunus and the Jamaat-e-Islami and other Islamist parties like Islami Andolan Bangladesh, Hifazat-e-Islam, and Hizb ut-Tahrir, and these students themselves. As you noted, when these students trying to reinvent themselves, trying to get support, trying to get a fresh lease of life, trying to really say that they were the defining moment that brought about this so-called second independence or second revolution or whatever. When they were doing all this and they put out a draft proclamation, at first Mohammad Yunus's government did indeed say that yes, that they were totally not associated with this. This was a private initiative. They defined what the students are doing as a private initiative. But within 24 hours or so, Mohammad Yunus government has changed its tune on this. And they have now said that they are going to join in the drafting of a new proclamation. And a deadline in this March for Unity has now given a deadline of 15th January for the drafting of this new proclamation. Of course, this proclamation, totally debunks Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, totally debunks the 1971 Liberation War, calls for an end to the constitution, and all the new everything new. Now, I think this is also a reflection of the fact that in Bangladesh, nobody has liked this call for debunking the old constitution. Even the BNP itself has said, no, why should we? We need a constitution. Otherwise, there's complete chaos in Bangladesh. When the students tried to depose the president, it was the BNP who came and said, no, the president is the one link to the constitution. We cannot depose him. So clearly, as I see it, there are all new centers of power emerging and seizing the moment and trying to claim that they are the main powers and so on. I think this it's a bundle of contradictions at the moment, and I do see that this will play out in the new year in very difficult circumstances. And I don't see how this interim regime can really last under these circumstances, because there is so much chaos. There is no law and order. If you recall, the American NSA, Jake Sullivan, had called Mohammed Yunus a few days ago, and he told him that what we want in Bangladesh is stability, prosperity, and democracy. Of course, this points to the fact that neither of these three things exist in Bangladesh today. There is no stability, there is no law and order. The army has been given magistracy powers and police powers, but they're not able to control the situation. There is no prosperity. The economy is in a total shambles, on a downward run, and people are losing jobs. And of course, there is no democracy, because these groups are just trying to claim power just out of the blue, with no relevance, with no significance, with no popular support. People in Bangladesh still value very much the 1972 constitution. And we cannot forget that the Awami League still enjoys about at least 40% support of the population. And it is this support of 40% that these students in the March for Unity, that the interim regime, they're trying to undercut, and they're trying to pretend this support doesn't exist. Actually, it is there, and this bedrock is very strong. And by these claims for March for Unity and undo the earlier constitution, they're trying to undermine the support for the Awami League, but it's not going to work. These are very desperate measures, and I think that the days of this interim regime seem to be numbered. Let us see what happens by January 15th, but I do not think that these kind of calls have any support. Even the BNP has come out strongly against it. Many other parties have come out strongly against it, and there's no unity on this. There is no unity on having a new
All right.
constitution, on debunking the other constitution.
All right, Ambassador, many thanks for your opening comments. And, you've raised, again, some pertinent points here. We're looking at jostling. But, this is where I'd like Mr. Chakma to come in, Director for Rights and Risks Analysis Group. Sir, first and foremost, like the Ambassador pointed out, these are desperate times. These are desperate measures. The economy in shambles. There's so much to talk about and look up to. Yet we're looking at these protests of usurping each other's power. Who's actually at the helm of affairs for these protests? I was reading up a statement coming in from the entire student movement as well. They said, we're trying to preserve the spirit of the uprising, which is why they again got together at Shahid Minar, which was again what happened back in July. The spirit of the July movement has to be preserved. The first thing that comes to my mind is Iran. I mean, it still is a revolution state. I mean, for the entire clergy to remain in power, the revolution must go on. It's the same case that kind of is taking shape in Bangladesh as well. How are you looking at the developments? What are you picking up from your sources? All these students, getting down at the same point again at Shahid Minar in Dhaka?
Well, this has been completely orchestrated by Yunus to justify whatever initiative he needs to take. Therefore, the draft declaration, which was drafted by these students with very bad English, was circulated day before yesterday. And when they could not gather necessary support from the masses, including the political parties like the BNP, which spoke openly against it, now the government has intervened. Then they, in a way, entered into this operation of the students, and they have now set a deadline for 15 January. So this 15th January, what they are looking at is, apart from declaring the elections, what interim government wants to do is basically to have some kind of political consensus and use this mob of, couple of thousand students to proclaim themselves as the movement of the students. There is no students movement any longer because Mr. Nahid had joined the government itself. So once he is part of the government, all the students advisor, so they are part of the government. So it's the separate, distinct entity. It's part of the actually the government. So what they are trying to do at this point of time is to have some kind of political consensus prior to the US administration. The new Trump administration comes in. So they do not know what would be the reaction of the Trump administration, how much focus it would be on Bangladesh. But it would be nice for the interim government to have some kind of consensus. So they will use this to then to sideline or put pressure on the BNP that you come around to have a declaration. And this is part of a process where the government, which actually relies on a Jamati Islami, which never had won more than 6% of the votes, to remain in power. And that's what I was saying. This is the government in Bangladesh, which is so anti-Indian from 1971 till today, whether it is, Mujibur Rahman or Ziaur Rahman, Ershad, Hasina or BNP, you never had so openly anti-Indian government, which is espousing the Pakistani sentiments in the country. So these people are not concerned about the law and order. These people are not concerned about the economy. They have only one interest, and that interest is to remain in power for next 1.5 years, use this to then create some kind of violence, postpone the election for another year, and by the time, the US will be into next set of elections. And Mr. Sullivan knows that, if they possibly think they'll come back to power after, 4 years, and they will still play the same game in Bangladesh. So whatever Sullivan is saying, this mess has been created by them, and he is only giving the lip service at this point of time. So this is actually a plan by Yunus to claim some kind of legitimacy, to put the BNP into corner so that you create some kind of an edge between pro-Pakistani, they will not say, but pro-Islamist, and the anti-Indian forces. And the pro-Indian forces. So that's what they are creating, and this student movement is exactly for that. Otherwise, there was no reason. Why would you choose 31st December and set the deadline of 15 August? You could have set this deadline to 30th January. They didn't do that because they want to make sure that everybody comes around by 15th January, so that they could go and tell the Americans we have a national consensus. I think the biggest challenge for the BNP is
That's a pertinent point you've raised here, Mr. Chakma. That is a pertinent point. So essentially, Ambassador and Mr. Chakma, what you've helped the viewers with right now is to make sure and help them understand that this is political maneuvering, this is jostling for power that's playing out here. But, Ambassador, I'm going to come to you next. We've spoken about, and Mr. Chakma was with us on that show as well, when we spoke about how, there's a new military ties with Pakistan that we're looking at. Is this actually a new Pakistan? You had that Supreme Court advocate also who was in India and gave that statement and reaction that this is not the Bangladesh what he saw took birth in 1971. Something new has taken shape in August this year itself. I'm trying to understand the implications of the growing anti-India rhetoric that we heard today as well. How should India now address this rhetoric of reducing, let's say, Indian influence in Dhaka without really escalating tensions? Because some of those audio clips, and of course, we can't really put them out to maintain on-air hygiene, there were clear anti-India rhetoric out at play over there.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This anti-India rhetoric has been part of their narrative for a long time. In the build-up to the regime change operation, they actually built up this rhetoric to show that being anti-Hasina is being anti-India, like linking the two things. I thought everything she did was because of India, everything she did, and it's India, it's blame for everything. But I think that as time goes on, as the people of Bangladesh realize more and more the strong interdependence with India for economic sustenance, for whether they come here for medical tourism or for coming to religious pilgrimages, there is a strong symbiotic interdependence between India and Bangladesh, and this is what the new regime is trying to pull down. as trying to say, let's do without India. Of course, Pakistan has really taken advantage of this moment, and they are doing everything to dismantle the legacy of the 1971 war. And the legacy has been the constitution, which has as its four pillars: democracy, nationalism, secularism, and social justice. And they're trying to demolish that. Say we don't need any of this. And Bangladesh has already allowed some series of events which were banned for Pakistan for the last 53 years. Ships are now coming with cargo from Pakistan. Visas are to be given to Pakistani openly. They can come and study in Bangladesh university, which was not allowed earlier. And they have started military ties, restarted military ties. And military generals are going to come from Pakistan and train people in Bangladesh, something which even Indian generals have not done for the last 50 years, although a lot of Bangladeshi defense forces came to India for training and a lot of interaction was there, but not this kind of direct training. I do not know to what extent this is going to be accepted by the people of Bangladesh, because this kind of rhetoric is not going to help them at all. We've already seen that one of the ships which came to Bangladesh, the first or the second ship, had banned explosives on it. And when the customs officer tried to stop the explosives, he was told to, forget about it. He was transferred, and those explosives were let into the country. There's also a lot of rumors that Jaish-e-Mohammed people, 37 Jaish-e-Mohammed individuals came on those ships and have melted away into Bangladesh, maybe headed towards India's northeast or elsewhere. There's a lot of very disturbing news coming out of Bangladesh, and I think for India, we have to take very serious note of the security situation now on our borders, and that is why our BSF is keeping a very, very close eye on the border. But of course, it's a very long, porous border, 4,000 kilometers, and certainly there's a lot of concern about what is happening in Bangladesh today, but this will not be able to last, I'm quite sure, because if the security situation continues to deteriorate like this, I think we're going to see something really happening within the next 2-3 weeks.
All right, so next 2 to 3 weeks, of course, a waiting game at least till the 15th, like the both of you have pointed out, before Donald Trump, dances his way into the Oval Office at the White House. But, Mr. Chakma, now that the waiting game is on, we understand that there needs to be a political consensus, and that's why the jostling and the political maneuvering. Of course, this is not the same Bangladesh that we've been seeing. Whether this is a new Pakistan, quote-unquote new Pakistan, well, we'll again have to wait and find out for that. But I'm trying to understand, the anti-terrorism bid, set forth by Prime Minister Modi, for the longest time of the last decade. And of course, international diplomacy that India is leading in the region. I mean, SARC is one name that comes to my mind. What are some long-term implications for something like that?
No, the use of the SARC and etc., it's basically an onslaught at international level by Yunus. We have to understand that Yunus's main focus, but the only way he could survive in Bangladesh is being anti-Indian. It's saying, for example, just because you have given shelter to Sheikh Hasina, then you become anti-Bangladesh. So would the BNP or would anybody say that with respect to Tariq Jia when he was staying in UK? Or would somebody else would say with respect to Dalai Lama being given shelter in India? So Hasina's presence in India is being used to create an anti-India sentiment. So the interim government shall be able to survive only if they remain anti-India and if they carry out anti-India activity. If you look at the present situation, the BNP is not being given the space because there is a huge section of the Bangladesh army who had brutally tortured, including Tariq Jia, during the interim government of 2008 and 2009. So those junior officers who are at the rank of colonel, brigadier or above, they are fearful of the BNP coming back. So they are supporting the government so that Tariq Jia doesn't come back or take revenge and etc. Then you have actually the Islamic forces within the army because they hate anything which is to do with the majority Hindus in India. So you have that particular sentiment. So you could see that, it's one thing to blame India politically, but another thing is to act under the law. There is no justice. There are no judges who are independent. So you have seen that, these 10 trucks of arms load, which came in 2004, everybody has been let off. Kiribia was killed, attack on Sheikh Hasina, everybody has been let off. each and every terrorist who were prosecuted by the BNP, they have been released. So you could see that actually, if somebody, takes the track record of the current government, it's extremely anti-Indian, and they will not survive. The problem for Yunus is he is not trying to hold elections, which he is mandated. Then again, he doesn't want support of the BNP. He wants to destroy the Awami League. If he gets an opportunity, he wants to send Sheikh Hasina to jail just the way he was pursued by Sheikh Hasina. So he is left with only Jamaat-e-Islami. And so long this interim government is there, the government of India has to be very, very clear, because they will not leave any opportunity to destabilize India. So that's why when he was appointed or being promoted as the chief advisor of the caretaker government, from Paris itself, he had said that, if Bangladesh becomes destabilized, we will see what happens to the Northeast India. So that's an off-the-cuff statement. It's a very well thought out statement. It's something which they had in mind. And if you look at his interaction when he was in the US, the speech which he gave at the Clinton Foundation, so he was part of the entire operation. So when he comes and threatens India, I think we have to be very careful about it. This is not a government on which or with which the government of India can deal with or can be confident that something diplomatically will work out. It will not work out. Because if that works out, he will not survive.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right, Mr. Chakma. I think security is that one little aspect that India needs to, constantly monitor, because as Bangladesh is marching through this turbulent chapter,